I want to share some of the fundamental approaches I use when making work. They help me interrogate the moment on stage, whether that is textual, physical, or choreographic. In this section, I want to explore what I call the three universes. So what do I mean by that? I often notice how in the rehearsal rooms or drama studios, we work hard making the work and then simply stand up and perform it. If it is choreography, we launch straight in, but I feel we're missing a golden opportunity to really explore who these people are and what exists between them before the touch, during the touch, and after the touch. These three moments are the three universes. Every touch on stage has to mean something, otherwise we're throwing the moment away. I want to take you through a short devising process and show you how applying the three universes can lead to a much more complex and nuanced relationship between performers and characters. As before, I'm mostly going to be using the outside eyes to comment on what we see. The information and knowledge that emerges from this exercise might come as a surprise to the performers, but that's okay because it all adds to empower their performance. The exercise is also a reminder at how brilliant our audiences are at reading the moment, of reading stillness, of understanding what exists between movement, between the words. It's important that we as theatre makers and performers understand that potential, that we harness their brilliance and engage with an active audience aching to find the subtext within the context. Right, we're going to create this very simple string of material using an old devising process called Hymns Hands. This is just a series of touches between two static performers. It couldn't be more simple, but it's really important to embrace that simplicity. Don't imbue it with any story or attitude. As ever with the building blocks, keep it simple. Now we've created our string of material using Hymns Hands, we're going to apply the three universes and explore what meaning we can find, what nuance and tension exists between the characters. So the first thing the three universes should think about is what happens before. Okay, and this is very much linked to the presumptions as well, in that you've made some material, you get up there and you perform it and we watch it, and we're not really exploring what it means to stand opposite each other or who you are or why you're doing this. The first thing I want to do is just separate you a little bit. Now from this space, you can't do your material, can you? So you have to actually make a move towards each other. That should raise questions. Okay, stop there. So again, another thing we haven't quite explored is permission to go and what this is. As I said, it's linked to the presumptions. We presume we've just got to do what we've been asked to do, which is start the movement. All the meaning and all the exciting stuff is in the movement. But for me as a theatre maker, it's this moment here. This is the moment before the touch. Okay, so we mustn't throw this away. So let's just have you standing there. And you don't have to have an acknowledgement between you. Shall we start? One of you will make a decision to move towards the other. And when that happens, a relationship emerges because you'll have a response to that. Whether it surprises you or whether it feels awkward them moving towards you or whether you feel you've missed your instruction, it makes the moment alive. So hold that, just hold that. You've changed the proximity massively and you've created a tension around the moment now. That, Jess, your world has changed, because of that proximity. Yours, Paolo, has changed massively because of that proximity. What happens next, we don't know, okay? It's really important that we don't know that. If one of you has an idea what happens next, you've got to remember it exists in the moment. It's full of risk. If it's about doing your choreography, knowing that your partner's going to replicate, then it's dead. The moment is dead. Think of it as a gesture, as an offer. Stop. Okay, so this journey from here to there is huge. And also Jess doesn't know where it's going. Do you know what I mean? Any movement of the hand, we mustn't presume that it's what we rehearsed. We need to take the rehearsal out of it and live in the moment. So that hand moving forward is full of the risk that she might go, no way. Yeah? Or that she doesn't think it's going to go there, that she thinks it's going to touch her body, which might change the way she thinks about the moves. And you've got to just remember that it might not be accepted, it might not reach its journey. So all throughout that journey, it's full of doubt, full of risk, and full of danger. We want to look at this now and consider the 3 universes of just that move.
Here, that moment when there's like a lighter touch, and then this one is a bigger one because you're taking more control and more surface. You're not restricting it, you're not trying to stop it. That moment for us is like, okay, well, there's something that people are agreeing with and going with that.
Can you just do it as well? Just do the move again. And what I want you to do, Jess, is just move your arm away as soon as his hand makes contact with you. What he does actually is touch your hip.
Yeah, it's a bigger deal.
If I stay there and we pause, and then I take that hand away, it exposes him.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? It was kind of secretive first of all, and then that. It's just about where the power lies. He might have set off with the power there, but then when it got there, and then I do that, I'm showing possibly rejecting him, but more than that, I'm actually showing the world what he's doing. Yeah.
And also the fact that you're not taking a step back. So you're staying your ground and you're only moving the arm away, which is exposing in a different way, rather than you would be going completely out of reach, which is a different statement from that.
Once we get into that universe of the touch, it becomes about the quality of that contact. That quality might be light, it might be delicate, but on the other hand, it might be strong and it might be firm. Once we find the quality that we're using, it's about what is it communicating to us as observers, as an audience? What are we finding in that? What does that tell us about the relationship that they're sharing in that moment of contact?
So as you go in to touch, already that's intimate, isn't it? And then here, there's submission, or I'm going with it, but you don't know where that hand is going, okay? And that's really important, that you trust that journey. Or rather, we highlight that as a choice you have made to trust that journey. How warm is that touch? How strong is that touch? How forceful? How needy? Is it desperate? Is it instructive? These are the questions we have to ask. And then how surprising is this? If that sat there like wet lettuce, whether it's actually Paolo that instructs a different type of touch because he needs that of you. Remember, it's about exploring the moment and making sure we're not throwing anything away. So we've looked at the moment before the touch, we've looked at the moment of the touch, we're now going to look at that universe after the touch. There's an understanding that happens between you. Is she receptive to it? Like if you just keep your arm really steady and I come in to touch that and you just resist completely, I've got to negotiate that moment because I wanted something and I'm not necessarily getting it until the point where you go, that's okay. And then we have an understanding. What we don't want to do is make our choreography grind to a halt. We're not interested in that. We're just trying to put this idea in your head that the moment is alive and that every moment is alive. I talked about this as text, statements made and received. So now let's not be woolly about the statements that we're making, make them absolutely clear. So for example, your move here, Paolo, where I think you take Jess's arm, can't remember where you go, but I think you send it down to there. Make sure that it completes, that what you want is the move to complete, and it's not just a go over there, okay?
Yeah.
And just apply that to all of them so they're nice and clear. See, now it feels like a negotiation, that there's instruction. And actually, as an observer, I'm not watching the moves as much as I'm watching the eyes, because they feel like human beings trying to communicate. I still believe that there's a commitment to the choreography there from you two, that you're still going through it. So I'm going to give you permission now to stop at any moment and just sit in it. Because it's one thing to touch a person, okay, and to find this new shape, but it's another to hold them in it. You know, and that maybe I'm happy in this moment, but you want to get out of it. Maybe I'm doing this just to assert my dominance over you. Or maybe I'm holding you because I'm scared. The stillness is where we, as an active audience, leap in and find there's a subtext here. There is a need for this touch. There's a moment in your move that's thrown away. Don't you think? I think we both nodded, so there's a particular... Yeah.
Paolo, your hand went here to place Jess's hand
Yeah.
there. From there, something happened and your hand brushed
It's a
through.
move you don't like. Yeah.
It was that same moment, isn't it?
Is that,
Why don't you like that move?
I think the journey was so long.
It's really interesting that Paolo's talking about this move that goes across Jess's stomach as being too long. And that's because he's thinking about the end product. He thinks he's got to get from here to there. Is that right? The move pretty much does that? Yeah. But we don't know that. As an audience, we don't know that. And neither should our characters. It becomes a huge statement. You don't know where I might look or how I'm testing you either. The moment of is stretched. And then having done that and let go, the moment after, what the hell was that? We just have to keep considering what that moment is. It's alive. The moment before, the moment of, and the moment after. That's not to say that our choreography becomes this incredibly slow thing. We're just in the moment of exploration. We can then apply that and turn this choreography into something completely different. But as long as every moment is considered, it remains nuanced and human. I think what we'll do is we're going to have a play with this choreography. See if we can break free from this, but see whether just by thinking of the moment before, the moment of, and the moment after can keep that choreography alive.
So we're now going to workshop the material a little bit and have a look at some different ideas. So we're going to start by looking at some dynamics and seeing what that gives us in terms of the way that we understand and observe the contact in the universes of touch.
We're going to go faster. So just the pace, looking at the pace of it, and it can never slow down. Let's just challenge it. A little bit of risk of trying to go a bit faster than you think that you're comfortable with. So when you come to the end, just start again and see if you can build on. Good. See if you can keep going.
Great.
Can you go faster? But allow the movement always to land. Still allow all your connections to land before you move on. So don't throw them that moment away. So even if you're going quicker, you're still allowing to press into the contact. What if you keep going, but if you're allowing your hands to be more heavy when you're making the contact, there's more heaviness and press.
What if we sit in the firmity of that touch, changed it from that first version that felt a little bit dismissive because we had these like really quick little touches that were kind of there and then they were gone. So even before it kind of landed, we were off. And now that we're landing in them, there's this kind of, I see the moments of communication that are happening between the two of you. It becomes a natural conversation between the two rather than it being a dismissive conversation of each other. It's taking us, from my perspective anyway, in the way that I'm observing it, away from some of that kind of dominance that we were talking about before in that, when we're in that slow space.
Or whether it goes into the opposite way, that if there is disagreement, and if we use the language of helping us into finding a different dynamic, so if we add resistance.
Yep.
And this one is something that we could play with, how far we take it. We could go that you have to resist even further, so it goes into the full body. I have to work even harder to move this hand. And eventually you'll have to give in, because then I guess it's a practical thing. We have a sequence to use for this, and so that it moves on. But whenever you can resist, you will, and whenever you can, you will.
Where it really highlights is places where we're not in contact with just arm on arm. So again, coming back to this one, there was so much power for all those other moves. And we got to this one that went across the stomach again and just went, whoop, just glided over. How do you resist that? Is it a holding of ground? We might find it gets us to move ever so slightly off the spot, because maybe we need to push into that hand to try and fight it. There was a moment where, Jess, you had Paolo's arm and you were trying to bring it to your shoulder, but it just wouldn't get there. So rather than fight to get it there, you just drove your shoulder into the hand. Yeah, there's a challenge, it feels like, from you. That's that come on, yeah? Finding that moment of that we didn't have before, which is really nice.
We're going to look at the focus this time and see how that will affect how we read the touch. Whenever you're moving the hands within this choreography, you're following. So if it would be my hand that is coming to Jess's shoulder, from the very beginning, both my focus and Jess's is going to go to the hand that moves. So we went through kind of 3 different things in that world. It's just to see of how effective it is when you just look to a different direction.
For me, the one that really stood out was when we switched from looking at the movement to Jess looking away and Paolo sticking with looking at that movement, because we went from a story that was both of them exploring each other, discovering each other, that was kind of this curious space, into this surety from you that wasn't an exploration at all, that you were letting Paolo find these positions of touch, that there was absolute kind of permission. You needed to look what was happening here. So we're going to play with one more thing now. Yeah. With the quality of that touch, that every touch that you make is about trying to calm the other person. Not that we're ever trying to play that we're getting riled up, but just every contact is about trying to calm the other person as much as possible. Doing it that way and seeing both of you in that calming space, I think for me it picks out lots of individual little opportunities through it. I'm seeing the way the hand is kind of moving down the arm, or there's like caresses that appear that weren't there before, where before it was kind of just landing statically in a place. We're finding all these little tiny little adjustments to the choreography that just tell us that little bit of story. Let's try now that we'll have a different intention each. So I think if we keep to calm with you, and I think maybe if we played to dismiss it.
So we've used the 3 universes to explore movement, but remember, it's not about creating choreography or movement, it's about exploring the moment. So just to test that now, we're going to have a look at the simplest little bit of text and apply the 3 universes. The text we're going to use is a simple question, how are you? And a response, I'm fine, followed by a statement, good. It can be presented in many different ways, and that's the point really. It is so simple and so open. And we're just going to get Jess and Paolo to play, and we're going to respond on the outside and think about the world that exists around. What's the subtext? What's not being said verbally?
How are you?
I'm fine.
Good.
If we think about the moment before the touch, this time the moment before the statement, there was quite a bit of silence. What was that tension? Was somebody withholding speech? Were they withholding information? Had something just happened? It just makes us think about what surrounds the moment. And then when the question comes in, Paolo answered quite quickly. So was that a way of blocking the question? Does Jess hear that aggression within Paolo, and is that enough? Does she appreciate that? Has she been told to go back to her place, or has she had her effect on him and is happy with that? So already it's complex. So let's try another.
How are you?
I'm fine.
Good.
It created a different tension around it, almost like we don't have time for your answer, we don't have time for your feelings, which suggested a particular type of relationship or a particular type of history, but also a particular type of future. The stakes are quite high here, and we don't have time to go into your story. We don't have time for you to show any weakness at this moment. Good that you're okay, because we're going over here.
We look at it in relation to those moments, so that moment before that is before your moment of the text being given. We look at it in relation to how tight it is then, and we glean all that information, not necessarily from the lines themselves, but from the spaces in between them and how they compare to one another.
All right, we're just going to try one more. And this time, the words are, how are you?
I'm fine.
Fine. Good. Okay. But now either of you can say the first question. okay? And just see how that affects your relationship.
How are you?
Fine.
Good.
What's really nice is that both seem to be fizzing with this question, wanting to say something. And it's that tension, that energy that we want to find with our physicality too. We don't go in just throwing away the moves because we have to do them. There needs to be an urge, there needs to be an ache to move.
How are you?
I'm fine.
Good.
Did you get the sense that Paola wanted to ask a question?
You could see your mouth kind of opening and going, you know? So I'm really like, oh, is he gonna, that's the signal for me.
But I think he drew us in because he wanted to speak and didn't get the chance to speak. The action doesn't have to have reached its conclusion to have a place in our mind and in our memory. It's like the moment where two characters on stage want to kiss and we're watching them to see whether it happens, and they don't kiss. And we leave the theatre that night talking about the kiss. So we get drawn into the concept of the move, the concept of the action. And I think this was a moment we were drawn into the desire to speak. For me, it remained right to the end. I never got to ask her how she was, you know, which is a really interesting and complex little moment based on those 3 lines. It's quite extraordinary that we can see that type of thing. Of course, if you're working with an existing text, then you already have a context and a subtext. But this experience shows just how active an audience can be. And with a little precision and guidance, how they can be led to an understanding of a complex scenario. This approach reminds us of the complexities of every moment. In real life, we don't know how it ends, and our minds are filled with many thoughts at the same time. We entertain many possibilities and outcomes before we take action. Think about the complexity of asking a stranger if they need any help. You don't know what kind of world you're going to be pulled into. You might consider it a risk worth taking, but it's certainly a moment that is alive and full of risk. It should be just alive on stage for every moment of touch, movement, and text. Everything you say or hear on stage is being said and heard for the first time. It needs to be said and heard from that perspective. Remember, your character doesn't have the privilege of knowing how the play ends. If we are truly living in the moment on stage, then every moment should be full of possibilities and not edited just towards the ones that fit the ending of the play. Touch, movement, and text must live in the moment, and that's what makes them electric. The 3 universes reminds us to stay in the moment and play the doubts and dangers of real life.
As a theatre maker, this approach allows me to find the detail in the storytelling of the physicality in the material that we work with.
For my work, what this process brings is it allows me to really zoom into the moment and really look into detail, whether it is a moment of touch, more complex choreographic movement, or the spoken word. And it allows me to draw out really complex and nuanced performances.
The universes of touch for me are really helpful when we approach lifting technique, so that we get away from looking at them as functional pieces of moving one person from one space to another, and we look at them as moments of storytelling. How are they negotiated? How does the contact happen? And how does the lift move? It gives us a lot of information about the relationship between those 2 characters.
So it's really important to understand that every single smallest shift and changes that you make can have the biggest impact in how the audience is understanding what is happening in that moment.
I'd say it's really important to listen to your directors or your teachers when they are negotiating what these universes are, and try not to hold on to what you think they are or what you want them to be.
I think working in this way takes the focus off doing things correctly, of doing all the moves right, and actually puts the focus on why and how we're doing things, which I think can be really useful for people who might be a little bit more nervous about approaching physicality.
It can be really thrilling to be using this exercise and to be opening up a moment and examining its potential. But if we do that endlessly, we end up getting lost. So I would urge caution and just examine little moments. This is a technique to keep in the back of your mind to apply when you feel that the work has been thrown away, the moment has been thrown away. You stop and just explore it. what could be happening here? What's the subtext? What are we holding on to? What can our audience see? How can we guide them towards that conclusion? The really exciting thing is that it encourages our performers to understand just how powerful they are, and for them to understand that movement is language, that stillness is movement, and language is movement and stillness, and all of that. They're all connected, and they're all ways that our audiences use to understand the moment. They are brilliant observers, and we need to engage that active audience on our side and allow them to help us tell the story.